Right now, as you're listening to this, something is already happening inside you, something that's been there for years, quietly, consistently, unnoticed. While my voice is speaking, your mind is running another conversation beneath it. A second layer, softer, but constant. It's analyzing what I'm saying, deciding if you trust it, pulling memories from yesterday, rehearsing something for tomorrow, all at the same time. And you didn't choose to start it. It just began. That second voice, the one you never invited, is the reason your reality feels heavier than it should. And I'm not going to tell you to silence it. That doesn't work. You've tried. I've tried. Anyone who has ever sat in silence has tried. And every time, the voice wins. Because it's using the same tool you would use to fight it. But here's what almost nobody tells you. That voice isn't just noise. It's frequency. It's a signal, constantly broadcast into the field around you, every second, whether you notice it or not. And that field, call it reality, call it life, call it whatever you want. It doesn't respond to what you say out loud. It doesn't respond to what you wrote in your journal this morning. It responds to what's underneath all of that. The signal beneath the words. The signal you can't hear, because you are the signal. Take a breath. A real one. Notice how it just happened, before your mind had time to decide. Something in you responded first. That same something has been trying to get your attention for a long time. And maybe, right now, for the first time, you're actually listening. Some part of you already knew where this was going. Some part of you has been waiting for someone to say it clearly, without decoration. You've read the books. You've done the affirmations. You've stood in front of mirrors, saying things that didn't feel true. And somewhere, quietly, a doubt started forming. Maybe the problem was never the technique. Maybe no one ever explained what's really happening between your thoughts and the reality you're living inside. That's where we're going. Because the moment you begin to see what your thoughts are actually doing beneath everything you call your life, something shifts. You stop trying to fix everything from the outside. You begin to understand why it kept slipping through your hands in the first place. And that understanding starts with something simple, but almost no one separates it. There is a difference between thoughts and thinking. We use those words like they're the same, but they're not. Thoughts are something that happened to you. Thinking is something you do. One arrives. The other is chosen. And for most of your life, you've been treating them as the same thing. That's why your mind feels exhausting by the end of the day. Let me show you. If I tell you don't think about a blue door, what happens? The image appears. Instantly. You didn't create it. You didn't decide to imagine it. It just came. That's a thought. It moves through you, the way a cloud moves across the sky. You didn't build the cloud. You didn't paint it. It passed. But now, if I ask you to design that door, choose the handle, imagine what's behind it, walk through it slowly, that's different. That's thinking. That's you, using your mind deliberately. There's intention. There's direction. There's an architect involved. But here's where it becomes uncomfortable. Most of what fills your mind all day isn't thinking. The worry about an email, the argument you replay with someone who isn't even there, the loop about something that happened 3 years ago, none of that is thinking. Those are thoughts. They're arriving constantly, and you've been treating them like instructions. You wake up, and before you even move, before your body gets out of bed, something has already started. A mood, a weight, a list, a subtle pressure. The signal is already active. And from that signal, your day begins organizing itself. Not because anything is working against you, but because without realizing it, you stepped back into the same frequency you fell asleep in. And your reality, the one you've been trying to change, simply continues, matching what you brought with you. And your reality, the one you've been trying to change, doesn't resist you. It simply mirrors what you walked into it carrying. That's where we have to go deeper. There's an idea in physics you've probably heard before, often dressed up in spiritual language. That observation changes what is being observed. At the smallest level, at the level of particles, the moment something is observed, its behavior shifts. It stops existing as a field of open possibility and collapses into something fixed, measurable, real. Now, I'm not going to pretend that translates perfectly into your everyday life. But there is something that does translate, and it matters more than most people realize. Attention is not passive. It never was. Wherever your attention lingers, something begins to tighten around it. Something begins to take shape. It becomes heavier, more defined, more likely to appear again. And what you call your life is, more than anything, the accumulated weight of where your attention has been living. Not occasionally, but consistently. Let that sink in, not as an idea, but as a felt truth. If your attention has been living inside fear for 10 years, you don't have a fear problem. You have a residency problem. Something in you moved into that state and never left. It unpacked its bags, it got comfortable, it started paying rent there. And reality, which doesn't argue, doesn't correct, doesn't negotiate, simply keeps delivering experiences to that address. Again and again and again. And this is the moment that changes people when they truly see it. Because suddenly, it's no longer about punishment. It's no longer about bad luck or karma or something outside of you holding things back. It's something much simpler and much more confronting. Your life is an echo, a precise, patient, faithful echo of the signal you've been holding without even knowing. And if that's true, then everything shifts. Not because you're going to force yourself into positive thinking. That was never the answer. The real shift is quieter than that, almost invisible. You stop confusing the cloud with the sky. You are not your thoughts. You never were. You are the awareness those thoughts move through. And the moment you remember that, even briefly, the entire structure begins to loosen. I want you to feel this, not just understand it. Don't change anything. Don't try to. Become calm. Just notice the next thought that appears. Whatever it is, the doubt, a memory, something random. Watch it arrive, and then watch it leave. Now ask yourself, when it disappeared, did you disappear with it? You didn't. You were there before it came. You were there while it existed, and you are still here now that it's gone. That unmoving presence, the one that stayed, that's you. That's what has always been underneath everything. Buried under years of noise, years of identification, years of believing every thought meant something about who you are. And that part of you is the only part that actually influences what comes next. Because the field doesn't respond to the noise. It responds to the source. This is why affirmations fail for so many people. Not because they're wrong, but because they're surface level. You can stand in front of a mirror and repeat, "I am abundant," 1,000 times. But if underneath that sentence, there's a quieter signal saying, "Please let this work, because I'm afraid it won't," the field doesn't read the words. It reads the fear. Always. Because that's what carries weight. That's what you actually believe. The signal is never the sentence. The signal is what exists beneath the sentence. And until you become aware of that layer, your outcomes will keep reflecting something that doesn't match what you say you want. You'll blame yourself, or the universe, or timing. But nothing is broken. The system is just being honest with you. It's showing you what you're actually carrying, not what you wish you were carrying. And there's something deeper here that most people never consider. Your thoughts are not only shaping what shows up in your life, they are shaping the body you're living in. The texture of it, the tension it holds, the way it breathes when no one is watching. Once you see this clearly, you can't unsee it. Because your body has been listening to you this entire time. Every thought, every loop, every imagined conversation, every quiet rehearsal of something that hasn't happened yet, your body recorded it. Not metaphorically, literally. Your nervous system doesn't know the difference between memory and reality. It doesn't know the difference between something happening now and something you're imagining. The response is the same. The chemistry is the same. The signal that moves through your bloodstream is the same. So when you replay an argument from months ago, standing alone in the shower, your body reacts as if it's happening right now. Cortisol rises. Your heart adjusts. Muscles tighten in places you don't even notice anymore. And then you step out, dry yourself, and walk into your day carrying the chemistry of a fight that ended long ago. And you wonder why you feel tired. But you're not tired. You're occupied. You've been hosting multiple versions of yourself across different moments, different timelines, and your body has been paying for all of them. This is what people misunderstand when they talk about energy. They think it's something mystical, something abstract, something you need tools or rituals to access. But in the most real sense, energy is simply what is happening inside you when no one is watching. It is the chemistry of your unspoken thoughts, the residue of every scenario you allowed to live in your mind for too long. It is the state your cells are holding, because they have no choice but to align with the story you keep repeating internally. And the field, the world around you, the people you meet, the opportunities that appear or don't, simply reads that state, in response. Without judgment, without delay, I'm going to say something now that might land a little heavier than everything else, and you're allowed to sit with it slowly. A lot of what you've been calling your personality isn't actually you. It's not your nature. It's not something you were born with. It's something that formed and then stayed. A pattern that's been running for so long. You forgot there was ever a time before it existed. The way you react when someone criticizes you, the tension you feel before a simple phone call, the quiet assumption that someone is upset with you when they don't respond quickly, none of that is who you are. It's a thought pattern wearing the costume of identity. And over time, you started believing the costume. But here's the part most people don't expect. That pattern doesn't want to leave. Not because it's harmful, but because it's loyal. It was built to protect you. At some point, maybe when you were 6, maybe when you were 16, maybe in a moment you don't consciously remember, something happened. And in that moment, this pattern formed. It stepped in. It did its job. It kept you safe. And then it never got the message that it could stop. So it stayed. And now, it's still protecting you from something that no longer exists by holding you inside a frequency that no longer serves you. That's why you can do everything right. You can journal, meditate, visualize, build vision boards, take cold plunges, do breath work, follow every system, every technique, and still feel like nothing is changing underneath. Because the pattern is older than the practice. The pattern doesn't read your words. It reads your body. And your body is still holding tension in the same places it did 10 years ago. So you don't change the field by changing what you say. You change the field by changing what your body is willing to feel. Listen to that again slowly. What your body is willing to feel. Because most people, quietly, have been negotiating with their own bodies for years. Not now. Don't feel that. I don't have time for this. It's not safe to open. Stay closed. Stay controlled. Stay together. And the body, loyal as always, listens. It tightens. It stores. It holds. And then it sends out a signal. A very specific signal. The signal of someone who is holding everything in. And that signal is what's shaping your reality. Not your thoughts about money. Not your beliefs about love. Not whether you said the right affirmation this morning. The signal underneath all of it. The signal of a body that hasn't been allowed to feel what it actually feels for a very long time. And this is where the real work begins. Not the visible work. Not the work that gets posted. The real work. The quiet work. The work that doesn't fit into a program or a timeline. The work of letting the body breathe again. Letting it shake when it needs to shake. Letting it cry when it needs to cry. Letting it sit in stillness without immediately reaching for distraction, a screen, a voice, another thought, anything to escape the texture underneath. I'm not telling you this is easy. I'm telling you this is the door. And you've been walking past it for years, searching for a different door with a better name, a louder teacher, something more impressive. But this one has always been here. Quiet, almost invisible. And when you finally turn toward it, everything begins to change. Not in the way you expect. Not all at once. But something shifts. Something loosens. Something starts to fall away. And something else begins to rebuild. And this is where most people stop. Right at the edge. Right at the doorway. Not because they're incapable, but because of one thing. Discomfort. But not the kind you've been taught to overcome. Not the dramatic kind. Not the kind that looks good online. Not the wake up at 4 a.m. or cold shower kind of discomfort. This is different. This is quieter. Harder to explain. Harder to show. It's the discomfort of sitting with yourself when nothing is distracting you. No phone. No noise. No escape. Just you. And what's actually there. That's the door. That's all of it. And I know it sounds almost disappointing because you've been trained to expect transformation to feel like a breakthrough, like lightning, like something dramatic. You've been told that one workshop, one ceremony, one moment will change everything. And sometimes those moments do open something, but they don't keep it open. What keeps it open is something much smaller, much quieter, almost invisible. The simple, consistent, unglamorous act of being present in your own body when nothing is happening. And the truth is, most people can't do that for even 30 seconds. What you just did, that small, almost invisible shift of attention, that's it. That's the entire secret. Everything else you've been chasing is decoration. And here's the part almost no one tells you. The reason this feels so difficult isn't because it's complicated. It's because the moment you turn your attention inward, everything you've been avoiding begins to rise. The grief you never had time for. The anger you decided wasn't acceptable. The fear that's been quietly shaping your decisions from behind the scenes. None of it disappeared. It's been waiting patiently, like something that always knew you would eventually come back. And most people, the moment they feel that, they turn away. They run. Not because they're weak, but because movement feels like progress and stillness feels like loss. So they move toward another technique, another teacher, another book, another retreat, anything that lets them keep going, because stopping feels unbearable. But here's the truth. Stillness isn't the end. Stillness is where the signal becomes clear enough to be heard. Think of a lake. When the surface is constantly moving, wind hitting it, ripples everywhere, distortion, you can't see what's beneath. You can guess, you can imagine, but you can't actually see. But when the wind stops, when the surface softens slowly, almost quietly, the bottom begins to reveal itself. Stones, branches, life that was always there. Nothing inside the lake changed. The water was always clear. The only thing that changed was the movement. Your mind is the wind. Your awareness is the lake. And everything you've been trying to understand about your life has been hidden, not because it wasn't there, but because there was too much movement to see it. And I want you to notice something. Even now, while you're listening to this, there's a part of you that's resonating, something is settling, something feels true. And at the same time, there's another part, quieter, more analytical, waiting for the method, the steps, the structure, the thing that finally makes it work. I'm not going to give you that. Not because I'm holding anything back, but because it doesn't exist. There is no technique that bypasses what we're talking about. There is no shortcut around feeling what's actually here. Every method you've ever tried, every meditation, every breath work, every visualization, every framework is just a different entrance into the same space, the same room. And that room is the one you've been avoiding your entire life. The room where there's nothing to fix, nothing to chase, nothing to become, no story to tell, no past to defend, no future to reach, just you exactly as you are. And when people finally step into that space, something unexpected happens. It feels empty, not powerful, not magical, empty, spacious, silent. And most people interpret that as failure. They think they did it wrong. They leave, searching for something more real. But that emptiness, that silence, that space, that's the point. Because that is the only place where a new signal can emerge. Everything else is repetition. Everything else is your past, recycling itself in new forms. The empty space is where you stop being a continuation and become something the field hasn't experienced from you before. That's the shift people are actually looking for. Not a new outcome, not a new situation, a new signal, a new frequency, something that isn't built from the past. And the only way that happens is when the old broadcast finally quiets long enough for something real to come through. Let me show you something I've seen happen more times than I can count. People spend years working on themselves, reading, studying, healing, optimizing, trying to become a better version of who they already are. And on the surface, it looks like progress. They speak more clearly about their pain. They understand their patterns in more sophisticated ways. But underneath, nothing really changes. The same loops keep running. The same emotional weight stays in place. And then, usually when they're not trying, usually in a moment they didn't plan, they stop. They sit. Not to fix anything. Not to improve anything. They just stop. And in that stillness, something happens that no book prepared them for. They realize they've never actually met themselves. Not really. They've only ever met the version of themselves described by their thoughts, the personality, the story, the narrator. But the one underneath, the one that was here before all of that, had never been felt directly. And the moment they touch that, even briefly, even by accident, the signal changes. Permanently. Because now, the body has a reference point. A memory of what it feels like to exist without the noise. And the body doesn't. Forget that. It keeps trying to return to it. And slowly, almost without effort, the field around them begins to shift. Not because they tried harder, but because they finally stopped trying to be someone. And the someone they actually are had space to breathe. Now this is where most people interrupt the process. This is where the mind steps back in and asks, okay, but how do I do this on purpose? And I want you to see something very clearly. That question is part of the trap, because this doesn't happen by force. It happens by allowing. You don't make it happen. You let it happen. And the difference between those two is everything. But that doesn't mean there's nothing you can do. There is something, not a technique, but a relationship, a way of relating to your own attention that opens the door more often and keeps it open longer. Because there is a way to live with thoughts that doesn't require you to silence them, fight them, or believe them. And once you discover it, things begin to move in ways you stopped believing were possible. Because the relationship is the whole thing. Not control, not mastery, not elimination. Relationship. Up until now, you've only had two relationships with your thoughts. Either you believe them completely, without question, the way a child believes everything they hear, or you fight them, push them away, label them negative, try to replace them with something better. But both of those give thoughts more power than they deserve. There's a third option, and almost no one talks about it, because it doesn't sell. You watch them. That's it. You don't follow them. You don't argue with them. You don't decorate them. You watch them, the way you would watch traffic from a window. Cars pass. You notice them, but you don't get in. You don't chase them. You don't shout at them. You stay where you are, and you let them pass. And the first time you truly do this, even for a short moment, something inside you shifts. Quietly, but deeply. Because you realize, maybe for the first time, that you don't have to do anything with a thought, just because it appeared. You can let it come. You can let it go. And you can remain exactly where you are as it moves through you. That's the doorway. That's the new relationship. But there's something you need to be aware of, because this is where most people slip without realizing it. The mind doesn't disappear. It adapts. It learns. It starts using the language of awareness to pretend it is awareness. So now, instead of thinking, I'm anxious, it says, I am observing anxiety. Instead of chasing thoughts, it starts narrating the act of watching them. Layer after layer of the same voice, wearing a more spiritual mask. So how do you know the difference? The real observer doesn't speak. It doesn't comment. It doesn't label what's happening. The moment there's a sentence about the experience, you've already left the observer and returned to the noise. And the moment you notice that, you're back again. That's it. That's the entire practice. There is no advanced version. There is no next level. Just this, repeated again and again, with more softness each time. And that softness matters more than you think. Because a lot of people approach this work with force. They judge themselves for thinking. They try to control their mind. They turn this into another place to fail. But the field doesn't read what you say to yourself. It reads how you treat yourself. If underneath everything, there's a signal that says something is wrong with me, then reality will keep reflecting that back, even if you're doing everything right. So the work isn't just noticing. It's noticing with kindness. When a thought appears, and it will, again and again, you don't punish yourself. You don't measure your progress. You simply notice and return. Notice and return. That's the rhythm. That's the pulse of a new signal forming. And over time, something begins to change. Not because you forced it, but because the mind no longer needs to fight for your attention. It softens. It becomes less urgent. Some thoughts stop appearing. Others lose their intensity. And what people call a quiet mind isn't silence. It's space. And in that space, something else becomes available. You begin to hear yourself. Not the voice in your head, but the deeper presence underneath it. The one that knows without needing to think. The one that's been here the whole time, waiting. And when that part of you begins to lead, your reality starts to reorganize itself in ways your old thinking can't explain. Let me slow this down for a second, because this part matters more than most people realize. A lot of people approach this work the wrong way from the very beginning. They approach themselves with force, like a drill sergeant shouting orders. They try to control every thought, silence every distraction, punish themselves for not being present enough. And without noticing it, they turn awareness into another battlefield, another place where they can fail. But here's what most people never see. The field doesn't respond to your effort. It doesn't respond to the words you repeat or the techniques you stack on top of each other. It responds to the tone underneath all of it. the subtle signal you're sending through the way you treat yourself. And if that tone, beneath everything, carries the message something is wrong with me, I need to fix this, then no matter how perfect your practice looks on the outside, the reflection you receive will match that signal. Not your intention, not your performance, your signal. That's why this next shift is everything. Not more control, but more softness. When a thought appears, and it will, again and again, you don't attack it. You don't judge yourself for having it. You don't measure your progress based on how quickly you can get rid of it. You simply notice, and then gently return. Notice and return. Notice and return. That's it. That's the rhythm most people overlook because it looks too simple. But underneath that simplicity, something profound is happening. A new signal is forming, not through force, but through consistency. And slowly, without you trying to force anything, the mind begins to change its behavior. The space between thoughts starts to widen, not because you push them away, but because they no longer need to fight for your attention. They were loud because they thought you weren't listening. And the moment you start listening, not with resistance, not with belief, but with quiet presence, they soften. Some thoughts disappear entirely. Others return, but weaker, less convincing, easier to let pass. And what people call a quiet mind isn't the absence of thought. It's the absence of urgency. The volume drops. The background noise thins out. And in that new space, something else begins to emerge. Something you've been overlooking your entire life. You begin to hear yourself. Not the voice narrating everything. Not the planner. Not the commentator. But the deeper layer underneath it all. The one that doesn't need to think to know. The one that has been here the whole time, waiting for you to stop long enough to notice it. And this is where everything starts to shift in ways your old logic can't explain. Because when that deeper part of you begins to guide your decisions, your reality starts reorganizing itself. Not in dramatic, forced ways, but in quiet, precise adjustments that feel almost too natural to notice at first. Let me give you something real. I've seen this happen again and again. Someone spends years trying to manifest something specific, a relationship, a career, a move, a certain version of life. They visualize it. They affirm it. They write it down. They follow every method they can find. And nothing happens. Or worse, it almost happens, then falls apart. And eventually, they get tired. They stop trying. And in that moment, when the noise drops just enough, they hear something underneath. A quiet clarity. A simple truth that was always there but couldn't be heard before. Sometimes it says, "You never really wanted that." Sometimes it reveals that what they were chasing was only a substitute for something deeper. And sometimes it shows them that what they truly want is far simpler than everything they've been forcing. And they listen, not because the voice is loud, but because it feels undeniably real. And then something strange happens. Their reality begins to shift, not toward the thing they were chasing, but toward something else. Something more aligned, something they didn't even know how to ask for. And looking back, they realize it was trying to come to them the entire time. But their constant mental noise was too loud for it to land. You've probably experienced a version of this yourself. A moment where you stopped trying, and suddenly something arrived. A solution, a connection, a clarity you couldn't force no matter how hard you tried. And you might have called it luck, or timing, or letting go. But underneath all those explanations, something very specific happened. The signal cleared. The surface settled. The deeper layer became visible, like a lake when the wind finally stops. And once you felt that, even once, you can't unfeel it. You now have a reference point. You know what's possible on the other side of noise. And that leads to the real question, not how to get what you want, but whether you're willing to stop generating the noise that's blocking it. Whether you can stay in that silence long enough to trust it. Because for most people, that's the hardest part. Silence doesn't feel like progress. It feels like nothing is happening. It feels like falling behind. And the mind, that old, familiar voice, will start getting louder again. It will tell you to do something, fix something, chase something, anything but stay still. It will convince you that the quiet is dangerous. That if you stop, you'll lose everything. But here's the inversion most people never see. The quiet isn't where you lose everything. It's where everything finally finds you. And this is where the conversation turns again, because there's something deeper underneath all of this. Something that explains why some people keep struggling no matter how hard they try, and why others seem to attract things without effort. The field doesn't respond to what you say you want. It responds to what you are actually available for. And those two are not the same. Here's the part most people don't want to face, because it requires a level of honesty that can't be faked. The field, whatever name you give it, doesn't respond to what you say you want. It responds to what you are actually available for. And those two are rarely the same. You can spend 10 years, 20 years, even longer, saying you want something, visualizing it, writing it down, talking about it, convincing yourself you're ready. But underneath all of that, there can still be a quieter signal saying, not really. Not if it means I have to change. Not if it means I have to let go of who I am. And that quieter signal, that's the one that gets through. That's the one shaping your reality. Because availability isn't a thought. It isn't a sentence you repeat. It's a state, a condition in your body. It's whether your system has space to receive what you're asking for. And if you're honest, really honest, you'll see that most of the time, it doesn't. You want the outcome, but you're not available for the version of yourself who could actually live it. And this is where everything begins to shift, because what people call blocks often aren't blocks at all. They're protection. Somewhere in your past, some part of you decided that getting what you want might not be safe. Maybe you saw someone lose everything after getting what they wanted. Maybe you were punished for success. Maybe you learned, without words, that having more would cost you something you couldn't afford to lose. And that part of you stayed. It kept running in the background, quietly steering your choices, keeping you inside a version of life that feels familiar, predictable, safe. That's why people get close to what they want, and then pull back. That's why things almost happen, and then fall apart. It's not because they're broken. It's because the signal underneath is saying, I want this, but don't make me change. And the field listens. It always does. It gives you exactly what you're available for, not what you're asking for on the surface. And here's the uncomfortable truth. If you actually received what you say you want, it would change you. It has to. You can't step into a different reality and remain the same version of yourself. Expansion requires capacity. And capacity doesn't feel comfortable. It feels unfamiliar. It feels like your system entering territory it doesn't recognize. And this is where most people misread the signal. Expansion shows up, and they call it anxiety. Their body starts reacting to something new, and instead of leaning into it, they retreat. They go back to what feels known, what feels controlled, what feels safe. And in that moment, the signal collapses back to the old pattern, and the field responds accordingly. It returns to delivering the same reality you said you didn't want, but were still aligned with. This is the quiet pattern most people never see. They think something outside of them is holding them back. Timing, circumstances, other people. But the truth is far simpler and harder to accept. They were the variable the entire time. So the real question becomes, how do you change that? How do you become available for something your current self can't yet hold? The answer isn't in forcing yourself forward. It's in becoming honest. Not surface-level honesty, but deep, uncomfortable clarity. Seeing what you actually carry beneath your intentions. Seeing the fear that contradicts your desire. Seeing the part of you that doesn't want what you claim to want. And instead of covering it, you allow it. You stop performing alignment while broadcasting resistance. You let the fear come up. You let it be felt. Fully. Without interruption. Without trying to fix it. And something unexpected happens when you do that. The fear begins to move. And as it moves, it loses its grip. This is why people who begin working with their nervous system, not just their thoughts, start seeing changes that feel effortless. Not because they found a better technique, but because they stopped lying to themselves about what was actually happening underneath. They allowed the old signal to complete. And in that completion, space opens. Because here's the truth most people miss. Emotions that are fully felt dissolve. Emotions that are avoided persist. They don't disappear. They become a constant background broadcast. The grief you didn't allow yourself to feel years ago, it's still there. The anger you pushed down because it wasn't appropriate, it's still there. The longing you dismissed, the fear you ignored, all of it is still active beneath the surface. Still shaping the signal. Still informing your reality. Even if consciously, you believe you've moved on. You haven't moved on. You've just moved past it without resolving it. You covered it with productivity, identity, distraction, but the signal never stopped. And the field doesn't respond to what's visible. It responds to what's real underneath. This is why, when people finally stop avoiding, When they sit with what they've been running from, their reality shifts in ways that seem almost unbelievable. Things they've been trying to force for years arrive within weeks. Relationships that felt broken begin to repair themselves. Opportunities appear where there were none. Not because something magical happened, but because the signal finally cleared. And once the signal is clear, everything becomes simpler. You stop chasing. You stop trying to control outcomes. You stop forcing reality to match an image in your mind. Instead, you respond. You move with what's in front of you. You follow small, quiet impulses that don't come from thought, but from something deeper. And life begins to organize itself around you, with a kind of ease you didn't think was possible. The people who seem lucky, who always end up in the right place at the right time, they're not operating on luck. They're operating without internal contradiction. There's no static between what they want and what they're available for. And because of that, the field responds cleanly, directly, honestly. And here's the shift you've been waiting for. You don't become that person by improving yourself. You become that person by clearing yourself, by letting go of what's been distorting your signal, by doing the quiet, invisible work of meeting yourself without performance, without fixing, without pretending, letting the old patterns complete, letting the new signal emerge naturally from a place that isn't trying to prove anything. There's something I need to say clearly, because without this, everything we've talked about stays incomplete. Most of what is being sold to you today as spirituality, as manifestation, as awakening, isn't transformation. It's avoidance in a more sophisticated form. It's a way of staying inside your mind while convincing yourself you're doing the work, a way of analyzing your patterns instead of actually meeting them, a way of collecting ideas instead of living them. And this is where the real shift begins, because real change doesn't look like what you've been taught to expect. It doesn't look like more knowledge, more techniques, more control. It looks quieter than that. It looks like needing less, like catching yourself in moments where you used to disappear, like noticing an old reaction and realizing you don't have to follow it anymore. It looks like choosing, in a very small moment, to stay present when everything in you wants to escape. And what most people miss is that this one decision, repeated over hundreds of ordinary moments, is what reshapes your entire signal, not a method, not a ritual, but the accumulated quality of how present you are in your own life. That's what changes everything. That's what reorganizes reality around you. And this is the work, the only work. And if you're still here right now, still listening this far, that already says something about you, because most people would have clicked away a long time ago. Most people don't stay for truth, they stay for noise, but you didn't. Which means you're not here for shortcuts. You're not here for surface-level answers. You're here for something deeper, something real. So if this is landing somewhere inside you, not just as an idea, but as a feeling you recognize, then don't treat this like another video you consume and forget. Stay close to this. Follow this channel, not because I need it, but because you need consistency in this signal. And what we're building here is quiet. It's not loud. It's not selling you transformation in 7 days. It's something slower, something that actually changes you over time. And the people who stay, the ones who return, are the ones who already know the difference between noise and something real. And if you've made it this far, you're one of them. So subscribe, stay with this, and let's keep going deeper together, because there's a question already forming in your mind right now, and we're about to step into it. Now here's the question that's been forming quietly in the background of your mind this entire time. What does this actually look like in real life? Not in theory, not in a retreat, but in a normal day, with responsibilities, distractions, a phone that won't stop buzzing, a mind that keeps pulling you in different directions. What does this look like when life is actually happening? And the answer is almost disappointingly simple. It looks like noticing. That's it. Not fixing, not forcing, not trying to become anything else. Just noticing the state you are in throughout your day. Noticing the subtle signal you are living inside of without immediately trying to change it. You're driving somewhere and you realize your jaw is tight. Your body is bracing for something that isn't even happening. You don't turn it into a project. You don't analyze it. You just notice it. And something in that simple act begins to soften. Not because you forced it, but because attention without resistance has a different quality to it. It's not pressure, it's presence. You're in a conversation and you feel defensiveness rising, that familiar tightening in your chest, that urge to react, to protect, to prove something. And instead of suppressing it or acting it out, you pause. Just enough to notice. There is defensiveness here. Where is it in my body? What is it trying to protect? And you don't need to answer. The act of asking is already creating space. Space you didn't have before. Space where choice becomes possible. For the first time in a long time, you are not just reacting. You are aware that you are reacting, and that changes everything. You're scrolling your phone, and you suddenly notice that you're not even enjoying it. You're feeding something that never feels full. And again, you don't shame yourself. You don't force yourself to stop. You just notice. And sometimes that noticing is enough for the phone to drop naturally. Not always, but enough to begin shifting the relationship. And this is the practice. This is all of it. Not something dramatic. Not something you post about. Not something you perform. Just small moments of awareness repeated throughout ordinary life. Because the field doesn't respond to performance. It responds to what's real. Underneath. And what begins to form underneath when you do this without judgment is a slow, almost invisible softening. A return. A coming back to yourself. And people don't like this part because it's not dramatic. It doesn't feel like a breakthrough. It doesn't give you a before and after story. But this is where the real change happens. The dramatic moments. The insights. The clarity. Those are just side effects. The real work is quiet, repetitive, almost boring, being present in your own life again and again, noticing, returning, until something deeper begins to stabilize. And as that happens, something unexpected begins to emerge. You start to enjoy your own company, not in a loud, performative way, but in a quiet, almost unfamiliar sense of ease. Moments where you are just there, waiting, breathing, existing, and it's enough. And for most people this is new, because most people have spent their entire lives avoiding themselves, filling every empty space with noise, distraction, input, because being alone with themselves didn't feel safe, didn't feel comfortable. But as this shifts, even slightly, even for a few seconds at a time, the entire signal changes. Because now there is something underneath everything you do, a different tone, the tone of someone who is not running anymore, someone who is finally at home within themselves. And that changes how people feel you. Before you even speak, before you even act, something about your presence softens the space around you. People trust you faster, conversations go deeper without effort, opportunities appear that you didn't chase. Not because you did something special, but because the signal has changed. And here's where it becomes even more interesting. The things you used to chase begin to lose their grip on you. Not because you don't want them anymore, but because you realize they were never the point. You weren't chasing the thing. You were chasing the feeling you thought the thing would give you. And that feeling is already here. It was always here, just buried under noise. And when you finally feel that directly, even for a moment, the entire structure of desire shifts. You're no longer trying to complete yourself through something outside. You're moving from a place that is already complete. And this is what people mean when they say awakening is ordinary, not because it isn't profound, but because it isn't somewhere else. It isn't hidden in a future version of you. It isn't locked inside a system or a technique. It's here, in this moment, in the breath you just took, in the awareness that has been with you your entire life, waiting quietly for you to notice it. And once you do, even slightly, even imperfectly, the question of changing your life, of attracting something better, begins to dissolve into something simpler, something more direct. You realize that the life you've been trying to reach is not in the future. It's in the relationship you have with this moment right now, and everything else, everything you call reality, begins to organize itself around that relationship, not as something mystical, not as something magical, but as a direct reflection of the signal you are living in, moment by moment. And here is where everything we've talked about quietly converges into something much simpler than you expected, because the field, reality, whatever name you give it, isn't reacting to your goals. It isn't reacting to your plans. It is responding to the relationship you have with this exact moment right now. And that means something very direct. If you are in conflict with this moment, if there is resistance, tension, a subtle sense that this shouldn't be happening, then your life begins to mirror that conflict back to you in ways that feel external but are actually reflections. But if you are here, fully here, even imperfectly, even for a few seconds at a time, something begins to reorganize around that presence. not as something mystical or dramatic, but as a natural consequence of the signal you are living inside of. And before we close, there is something important, something most people never question, a quiet assumption that has been shaping your entire experience without you realizing it. The assumption that something is wrong with you, that you are not ready yet, that you need to fix something, learn something, heal something before you are allowed to fully live. And that assumption, more than anything else, is the signal you've been sending underneath everything else, the signal that says I am not there yet, and the field has been faithfully responding to that, giving you experiences that confirm it, keeping you in a loop of becoming without ever arriving. Because how can you arrive somewhere when the signal you are sending is that you haven't arrived? And this is where the shift happens, not in doing more, but in seeing clearly that there was never a version of you that needed to be earned. There was never a threshold you had to cross to be allowed to exist fully, the version of you that you've been trying to become, the healed one, the aligned one, the one who finally has it together, is not ahead of you. It is underneath everything you've been doing to try to get there, and the effort itself has been what was covering it. So for a moment, just one moment, stop trying, not forever, just for one breath, and notice what remains when the effort drops, that quiet presence, that awareness that doesn't need to prove anything. That is the doorway, the only doorway, and it has been here the entire time, hidden not by complexity but by constant motion. And when you begin to see this, something else becomes obvious. Your thoughts were never the problem. They were never your enemy. They are like weather, constantly moving, constantly changing, passing through something much larger. And the only confusion was that you forgot what you are. You forgot that you are not the storm, not the rain, not the clouds. You are the space that holds all of it. And when you mistake yourself for the storm, reality reflects storms back to you. But when you remember, even briefly, that you are the sky itself, something loosens, the weight begins to lift, the signal begins to clear, and the life you've been trying to change for so long starts to rearrange itself around a different center, not because you forced it, but because you stopped interfering with it. And this leads to something very simple, something you can actually do, not as a technique, but as a recognition. The next time the noise returns, and it will, see if you can notice that you are noticing. See if you can find the part of you that is aware of all of it, the part that hasn't moved, the part that was there before every thought, before every identity, before even the name you call yourself. That is the part that the field responds to. That is the signal that changes everything. And if something in this conversation has reached you, even slightly, then don't let it become just another video that passes through you. Stay with it, stay connected, subscribe to this channel, and continue walking this path with us, slowly, honestly, without noise. Because what we're building here isn't quick transformation, it's something real, something that unfolds over time. And if you know someone who is lost in their own mind, someone who keeps searching for peace in more noise, send this to them. You don't need to explain it. Sometimes the right words at the right moment are enough. And before you leave a comment, not for me, but for yourself. What did you feel? What stayed with you? What is still moving inside you right now? Because those are the places we go next, and I read them. And they shape what comes after this. So thank you for staying until the end, truly, because most people don't. And that says something about you, something you might not fully see yet. Take a breath, a real one, and notice you are already home. You always have been. And from here, everything changes.